Welcome to the Progtalks by the Progspace. Welcome to the Progtalks, an interview series by the Progspace where we will be talking to musicians in all corners of the progressive music scene. Welcome to the Progtalks. Once again with me, Uncle Prog, and once again I have exciting British bands with me. Two musicians, drummer Tom Rice and guitarist Dan White from Konom. Welcome, guys. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Both at the same time. Hi. Thanks for having us.
Well, of
Better
course,
get used to that.
That always happens when you have more than one interviewee, but I'll try to guide us through it. You know, it's been a few months since that release of yours, the debut album, which is self-titled, right? It was released on the 26th of February. So I guess you've had some time to look at the reception from fans and reviewers. Are you happy with the feedback you have been getting since the release, Tom?
Yeah, really happy. We've sort of cheated a bit because it is a debut album, but me and Dan have been in a band together for about 10 years, so cheated a bit there. But as far as the release, yeah, it's gone much better than we thought, really, because it's the first time we've started getting to a lot of people who, you know, are in different countries, have no affiliation with the band, but just purely like the music and want to check it out. So yeah, it's been really enjoyable.
You, Dan, happy with the feedback, the reviews, everything? I've seen you've been getting quite a few.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been pretty much entirely positive, thankfully, which is a nice thing to see after you've spent so long working on stuff. I think part of it is the difference, I guess, with this album between this and the last EPs. We put a hell of a lot more work into it. We took a lot more of guidance, I guess, especially from yourself and Pauline, and I think that's really helped us elevate it. Like we pretty much came into it from obscurity because we spent the last 7 or so years releasing music and playing as Ascent. Changed our name pretty much without any announcement, and then we come out with this album. So I mean, it's a bit of a Christmas miracle. We've done so well with it
in February.
For any new band, it's difficult to make it into, you know, magazines and get your name out there or whatever, but it seems you guys have pushed hard and done a good job of it. You know, what is the challenges of being like a self-managed band sort of and trying to get out there, Dan?
I think it's the same question for everyone. How do you get people to listen to your music?
Yeah.
And I don't think there's one real answer to that. A lot of it will be sort of brute strength, sort of throwing it as many people as possible. But I think we were quite keen to sort of target, at least for the reviewers and the radio shows and stuff like that, really prog-centric. We had a couple of metal-centric, I guess, targets as well. Amazingly, we managed to get into, I think, the May edition of Metal Hammer.
Yeah, I saw
Germany, which is out of the blue, but really cool. But yeah, it's a challenge, but it's nice seeing the pickup. I mean, you get all your nice stats whenever you like log into Bandcamp and Spotify, and then you look at the map of who's listening. You think, God, why is someone in Australia listening to us?
Yeah, but that must be a nice feeling to be able to see those, you know, people across the world actually, you know, listening and enjoying the album, right, Tom?
Yeah, completely. And I mean, I think we sent one CD to Japan, and I just had like a smile on my face for about 3 weeks solid after that because I'm obsessed with Japan. But yeah, going back to the challenges of it, it's been a good learning experience, and yourself and Pauline really helped a lot. Like, you gave us a big leg up in terms of how to do a press kit for people who are good people to connect with. And then also, like, Dan sort of figured out the Facebook side of it as well, so that helped us a lot, because we've basically been a bit lethargic with the social media for the past 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So Dan actually figuring it out and pushing it was really good as well. So yeah, very happy.
Yeah, as someone who is not like, the biggest fan of social media myself, I can see the struggle of both, trying to use these platforms to get the best out of your promotion, and at the same time, you really wanted to be about the music and spend your time on the music. So, but I think you guys seem to have done a good job of it. You mentioned, Tom, that you guys have been playing together for 10 years. And I wanted to ask a bit about the history of the band, because I think I didn't really sort of get my eyes open to you until that EP released last year. So can you tell me a little bit about how Konom started, why you decided to change the name from Ascent and this whole history?
Yeah, I mean, so me and Danny met over Join My Band, which is just, it's not the world's best website, really. You don't actually expect any good bands to come out of it, but 10 years later, here we are. And we started jamming, and Danny had a roommate that played bass called Kos, and we found a guy called Andy online who played keyboards, and basically we sort of built it from there. We released an instrumental EP, did a lot of gigging around Manchester, got Arya on board to do some singing, and released another EP. And then we started writing the album, the Konom album that's just come out. And one of the things we thought was, it's quite hard to find a unique band name. Ascent itself, it's quite hard to like differentiate. I can't spell. Differentiate yourself from a lot of other bands.
Yeah.
And I think we discovered there was like one band in our rehearsal space called Ascent as well. And we were like, right, we need
really?
a band. Yeah, we need a name that if you Google us, you actually get our band. So that began like an 8-month process of trying to find a band name we all liked, which thankfully we got there in the end. Me and Danny are big nerds about sci-fi. We both like the Foundation series by Asimov. And at that point, we were sort of borderline just trolling for cool sounding words. And Danny sent that over, and we stuck with it. So,
well,
yeah,
I guess you're not the first band that sort of picked a nice name for their band, just to find out that there are like 10 other projects and bands using the same moniker when you Google it, right? So
yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say, I'm sat here in a Cynic t-shirt. We all love Tool, but if you were trying to make a band with either of those names now, there'd be like 5 other bands who already have a Facebook domain, and you can't sort of assert yourself. So
you have to find something a bit more obscure or unique, or absolutely. It's sort of like the standard question that I hate to ask, but I feel I need to do it anyway, because people need to know. How would you describe the music you make? Dan?
Neither of us want to answer that.
Both of you were like, I hope that's not for me.
What was it? I feel like I had a good definition of it a while ago. It's a sort of, I think a lot of people might identify a bit more as the sort of classical side of, prog metal in the 90s, your sort of early Dream Theater, your Fates Warning, but with just a bit more sort of modern influences in there. So, things like obviously Meshuggah, Devin Townsend have had a pretty big impact on the progressive metal sphere. And they influence a lot of people who will in turn influence us. So I like to think we hit a good sort of blend of the classical and the modern.
Yeah, I was going to say we all have our favorite sort of older prog bands as well, like Yes and King Crimson, and Johnny's massively into Genesis. So that sort of there's definitely a hint of the 90s progressive metal, more than a hint. But we feel like it's got a bit more substance because we like the stuff they liked as well, so
yeah, it might be just me, but I also sort of felt like there was a hint of like 80s Neoprog, the Marillions and Pendragons and all those bands in your music, which sort of made me a bit like eager because, that's not a decade you hear younger bands, take inspiration from so much. So it's like you said, it's like this early 90s traditional prog metal mixed with 70s, some 70s, like the big bands of the genre, but also I felt like there was some neo-prog in there. Am I completely off field with this?
I wouldn't say so. It's to be honest, it's something that, well, from this release, I've been surprised to see quite often. A lot of sort of Marillion comparisons have been brought up.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess, go ahead.
Sorry, no, go on, mate.
I think a lot of it would be I like a lot of the sort of happy sort of melodies that you might get with some of these sort of 80s neo-prog bands. So
yeah,
I think that will be some sort of influence that's come in.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, going back to Johnny, like in Genesis as well, there's obviously a big Genesis imprint on neo-prog with bands like IQ and Marillion. And I think if that's your sort of taste, it's definitely going to sort of blend in as well. As soon as you hear a lot of Mellotron, then you think,
yeah, of course. then that comes up. Of course, is a natural feeling to have that to hear those influences. Well, then you changed your name to Konom, and you released the album, and but you also had I believe there were some lineup changes between the EP and the album, right? So the EP was released in March 2020, and then the album about a year later. So what happened in between?
So I think the EP that we released in 2020 was a remix and remaster of our 2015. So I can't really remember the years, but I think maybe 2016, 2017. Chris and Andy, who played bass and keyboards, left the band pretty much in the middle of the writing process for the album. So I think the first two tracks quite a heavy influence from their contributions, whereas the second two songs were written at the same time that we were looking for other members. So Jonathan and Benjamin came in, and they sort of put their ideas forward for that.
Well, talking about that, putting the ideas in. Who does the songwriting for Konom, and how do you guys work when creating new music? Are you, well, of course, now we're in Corona time still, and that means that a lot of bands work more digitally and sending files to each other. But in a optimal way, or before this happened, were you the kind of musicians that got together in the rehearsal room and worked out the tracks, or do you is like someone coming up with a full idea, or how does your songwriting process work, and who's sort of the main songwriters? Dan?
I think it's a combination of what you just mentioned. When before Corona, but whenever I was living in Manchester, we would have fairly regular jam sessions.
Yeah.
Where we would flesh out quite a lot of ideas, have a lot of jams, and see what comes from them. But at the same time, there was that element of, I would do quite a lot of the songwriting, and I would put forward sort of song ideas, riff ideas, and then myself and Tom would just bounce them in the practice space. just to see if they were any good and what sort of things came naturally just from playing them.
Yeah, and if we could play them as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think as it's gone along, there's been a bit more of a focus on writing in the computer to check, because it's all a bit more intricate. So I mean, Danny writes a lot, obviously, on guitar, and it's not all programmed or whatever, but just to make sure the arrangements work out and we have the flexibility, there's quite a lot of that and quite a lot of demoing back and forth as well. Just so we've got constant recordings to kind of reflect on with it.
And you need someone to, I guess, listen back to it and make sure you're not going too far off into the deep end.
Well, of course, but
sometimes cut a couple of minutes off those rambling prog sections.
Well, but that means that you guys are sort of doing the main songwriting for the band. You know, what about the rest of the musicians that are in the band now? Do they contribute to songwriting or to sort of the shaping of the songs once the IDs are out, or how does that work?
I think Benjamin and Johnny, they sort of came in a bit late on the songwriting front. More or less everything was sort of in place, and it was more the arrangement and sort of changing small bits. But I think for sure from the future it's going to be less centric on my writing. We're going to have we already have some ideas being thrown about from Johnny and from Benjamin. So I think it's going to be a good collaborative effort.
More of a band effort. And
yeah, I was going to say when Chris and Andy were still in the band, they were very much involved with it as well. At the time. So, but as they left during the writing, a lot of it was written by the time that Benjamin and Johnny came in. But it's been good because those two are both they've got a lot of character to what they do. You know, Benjamin just plays a fretless bass and has his own tone and you know, it's a bit different. And then Johnny loves his orchestral stuff. So even though they weren't necessarily involved in the composition, they made a big impact on the overall production. Definitely.
Yeah, I agree with that. Of course, the EP is like you guys mentioned, a remixed and remastered. So the songs are much older, but it's very clear, you know, that this new album is quite the step up from you know, for you guys. How would you like? If I asked you, you know, the changes between, you know, you recorded that stuff that's on the EP and now, you know, what's the improvements? What's the big changes to the sound of Konom, Tom?
I mean, it's mostly experience, I think. Because, for example, the drums, it's the same drum kit, same room, same microphones. In fact, we use this microphone, this very microphone. So, yeah, there's lots of nerdy stuff that we basically got wrong on the EP, and we just didn't get it wrong this time. You know, like keeping the drums in phase, and that sort of thing. And I think the mixing as well. So the part of the reason we put that out is we basically wanted to practice mixing on something that wasn't the album. So we thought, you know, we weren't, we knew we could make some improvements on the mix. So we used that as a learning experience, released it, and then moved on to the album. But yeah, in terms of the production, we've just learned a lot more. I know Danny's got lots of new toys as well to play with on guitar wise. And yeah.
Quite typical for musicians, right? To keep, you know, not only improving your skills, but also your set of equipment, right? Which means that there are new options that become available in a way, right?
Yeah, I mean, things as simple as these new profiling amps from Kemper means you can sort of just sit in your room and you can have the exact tone you want. You don't have to dial it in or mic up an amp. You can sort of just even record over as little or as long as you want. And that was at least helpful. I think a lot of the stress of it is when you have a time constraint. You sort of sit there and just like, oh, well, that's good enough. That'll have to do.
Yeah.
Whereas this time we're able to sit and meticulously, you know, maybe I didn't play that chord with enough with enough zazz, I'm gonna do that chord again. It's a lot more freedom, a lot more time to do things.
Yeah,
I think we sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we definitely dialed up the OCD on this album as well. There was 5-page Word documents with half a dB changes on keyboard patches and stuff like that.
Yeah,
going back and forth just because we wanted it. We wanted to listen to it and not have that feeling of like, oh, I wish I'd tweaked that. I don't think there's a single moment production-wise where we could have tweaked it or got it any more sat how we wanted it to. So
yeah. Well,
sorry.
I wanted to talk about that because of course these modern times sort of bring these opportunities for people to record more in their own studios or at home, which means that you don't get that time pressure that you would have if you're on the clock with you can see your money running away as the hours in the studio go by. But at the same time, I guess that means that you have to figure out everything yourself. You don't have the benefit of having like a studio with a setup and someone in there who knows exactly the room and everything. So how was the album recorded then, and over what period? When did you start recording for the album, and how did you put it all together to make Konom the album? Dan, maybe.
I was just laughing. I was going to ask Tom what year we recorded the drums in.
I can tell you. Yeah. So we did the drums in May of 2018. And I remember that just because my mate had a kid on the day we were doing drums. And by the time we'd finished the album, he was like walking and talking. But yeah, we did the drums at my parents' house, which there was a bit more time pressure whenever you do drums because you still got to find somewhere you can be uninterrupted for a few days.
Of course.
And then after that, yeah, it's sort of it's quite loose. But yeah, so we did the drums in 2018, and then we've sort of been adding to it and tweaking it to it up until we pretty much had it tracked apart from vocals, I think, before the lockdown, and then we spent quite a lot of time in the lockdown on the mix.
Yeah.
But,
and did you?
And I think.
Did you guys record separately? Like, did you record at home or did you use? You didn't use a studio for this, right? You. What about the bass and the keyboards? Was everything recorded separately, or did you have like a home studio? Do one of you have a home studio where you made that happen?
No, it's all online.
Yeah.
Well, I say. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, Danny was living with me for part of it, so there was quite a lot of back and forth then. And but yeah, it's a bit embarrassing really to admit to, but we've met Johnny in person once, and the rest of the time he's a legend. He just gets everything done and sends it over to us, and yeah. Obviously, we're hoping to start seeing a lot more of him now because we got to know him and then COVID happened. But
yes, of course, and this is a story that a lot of the bands I've been talking to tell. They talk about how they haven't been able to see each other for a year or more, and of course, when you're bringing new musicians into a band like that, that can be a challenge, but it seems to have worked out well for you that you have clicked, even if you were unable to actually get together so much and work together, right?
Well, yeah, we jammed with Johnny once. I went up to where he lives for a couple of sessions during the recording because I'm a bit precious about like the sounds that I wanted to hear in the album. So I sort of went up to sit with them and just go through everything, because it's quite difficult whenever you're sending files across and you say, oh, what about this lead sound? And then he says, oh, what about this lead sound? It's just like, well,
yeah.
If I was there, it would be a 10-second job rather than a hour between every time. So we had a good couple of sessions like that. And I think we got some pretty good signs out of it. But I mean, for sure, it's going to be difficult. But I think we'll definitely make an effort to turn it into something that is a band rather than a collection of people working on a project.
Well, of course, and now I guess it's now the pandemic is sort of slowly getting under control, and these options will hopefully open up for you guys to actually be more of a band, right?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great to just get in. We still have a rehearsal space that I do some teaching out of, so it'd be great to get in there whenever Danny's down and Benjamin's in the area. So we're definitely planning to. There's only so much you can do not in the same room, as Danny was saying. So you need occasional meetings to consolidate everything and check it's all working.
You need just ideas bouncing back and forth in real time to really cement it in.
100%. You mentioned that the drums were recorded back in 2018. So how old is the oldest material on the album then, and what is the oldest parts, and what is the stuff that's written most currently on the album?
Well, I think. Go on,
Dan.
I think. I think the first track. So the first track's pretty old. Originally, Prelusion, which was our EP in 2015.
Yeah.
We wanted to have this as a 3-track EP, and A Welcome Change was earmarked to be on that EP. But it got to the point where the rest of the tracks were ready. This one wasn't quite ready, and we just thought, you know what, we're not gonna rush this through and have it half baked. So let's just shelve it for the time being and continue with that. So Welcome Change will be something around 6 years old, I think, going back to 2014 for some of the first ideas.
Yeah.
But I think maybe The Great Harvest is probably the youngest of the tracks. I think that was completed fairly close to the recording sessions, because it does get to a point whenever you're writing when you sort of just need to look at the time you've been writing it, look at when you're going to record, and think, this just needs to put a pin in it somewhere and get on with it. So I think there was a couple of months between we were happy with the structure of The Great Harvest and starting the drums recording.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty quick turnaround.
If you are enjoying this interview, please head over to theprogspace.com for more reviews, articles, pictures and interviews, all about progressive music. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. theprogspace.com. So I wanted to ask a little bit about the lyrical content of Konom. The album consists for the most part of one long suite called The Great Harvest, part 1 to 5. What is this Great Harvest, and is it a concept or a theme on the album? You look very thoughtful, the both of you know.
Wow, yeah. That is a difficult one for us to answer.
I think a lot of it, I'm speaking for Arya here, it's his department, obviously, or was at the time.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's about, he's quite a spiritual guy, so I think a lot of it's about sort of learning to understand yourself and reap the harvest of, as you move through life, making improvements and understanding yourself better. But I think his way of writing lyrics is he wants to leave it so it's open to interpretation.
Yeah. So
someone else can come in and get something fresh out of it. So in that sense, he doesn't want to sit there and talk you through it. He wants it to be personal to you. So
yeah, I think that's like really good lyrics. It's just like poetry, it means different things to different people. And I don't know if you guys have had that experience where you love a band and then you listen to it when you're in your early 20s and the lyrics mean one thing, and then you revisit it a few years later, and suddenly with added life experience, the lyrics seem to mean something else. So I guess, that having that spiritual side of it is important. And are the lyrics connected to the album cover, which is beautiful, by the way? Tell me a little bit about that cover and who's the artist for that?
That's a guy we know who's a bass player for a great band called the River Verses, and I've known him on and off through various bands for years. He's called Jimmy Trippier. Is that yeah?
I have no idea. I look at the name and I think Jimmy Trippier.
Yeah. We're saying it very northern there. It sounds like it should be like a French pronunciation a bit. So we just hired him to do it, and he's incredible. He's the easiest guy to work with. He's just done all our t-shirt designs. We again, going back to the sort of Asimov thing, there's a few planets on that where there's quite a stark. It's like because a lot of it's about it's like a science fiction fall of the Roman Empire. So to be like these great old buildings and then feudal people living around them, not knowing what they were looking at. So in the same sense, you've kind of got this sort of farmer society, and then this orb at the end, and it's about that sort of disconnect in a sense. But we gave him quite a bare bones. We gave him that sort of idea, and then he just completely ran with it and nailed it.
Because now we're talking about the science fiction writer Isaac Asimov, of course, and is this his foundation books that you are sort of inspired by with this concept of and the name, of course, and
it's not like a concept album about the books, but we just like them very much, and that's something that's like a common overlap. That we all seem to like. And we felt we could do something a bit. We like the sort of retro angle of it a bit as well. It's a bit different. So yeah, that's why we went with it.
Yeah. So I guess that's, you mentioned how your previous vocalist Arya was the person who wrote these lyrics now. So I guess that brings it into me asking about, he recently decided to leave the band. So what happened there, and are you guys currently searching for a new singer then, or do you have someone in mind maybe, or do you have any info for me on that? Dan?
No info as of yet. We're not actively seeking at the moment. I think we're just at the moment finding our feet with what we're gonna continue to do musically. I think we just naturally got to the point where we just had different visions for what the band and the music was about. There was a bit of disconnect between what we were striving for and what Arya was striving for. So it seemed like after this album, the natural sort of time to part ways. And it's done. We're still on amicable terms and all that. So no bad blood. But yeah, for it's a question of our future music, isn't it? What sort of shape it will take, and whether that necessarily needs vocals. I think at the moment we're not worrying too much about it. We're not going to actively, say, "Oh, we need to have vocals," or say, "We're not going to have vocals." I think it's a case of what happens.
Well,
I think.
Go ahead, Tom.
Sorry, I was just going to say, we've not got a label to keep happy or anything, and we can go back and forth. If we wanted to just put out 3-minute instrumental songs on Spotify for the next 10 years, we could do, but don't worry, we're not going to.
Hope not.
But oh, maybe we will. But we've got complete flexibility. So if there's no pressure to find a singer, it'd be nice to have one. But we can also, we've been an instrumental band before. We can explore that for some time as well. And I think there's a danger of trying to like fall into old ways of thinking in terms of, we need a singer. Well, we don't always, we can do it exactly how we want to with the tools that are out there, which is nice. Yeah,
but on the other hand, now that, as we mentioned earlier, the pandemic is sort of winding down a bit, and hopefully chances for you guys will come to get on stage and perform some of this material. I'm sure there's, of course, you could perform it instrumentally, and you could probably do different things with it in that way. But would you consider, hiring like a guest vocalist or something then to perform the album? Tom?
I don't know about hiring someone. I mean, it's not out of the question. As you say, we're still on reasonable terms with Arya, so something could happen there.
Yeah.
For the sake of putting a full stop on everything.
Exactly.
But we were out and about performing the material anyway before we released it, which is just another strange thing that we did. So it has been gigged, and we've done some live videos as well. There's a new one on Thursday. Although I just realised this podcast will be going out after it, so
yeah, so
already be up.
Look on screen. A link will show up on screen here for you to click and
Thank you very
watch
much.
That. Yeah.
So we'll just have to play it by ear, and figure out the logistics of it all. I think we're quite keen to figure out how to write with the new setup first, and then off the back of that, figure out where we stand in terms of gigging.
Exactly. Yeah. I want to move on a little bit into you guys more. Your musical history. The band's music definitely falls in the progressive music category. So what is your inspirations when it comes to progressive music? What sort of the first bands you listened to in the genre and made you fall in love with the genre? Dan?
I think for the longest time I was into some fairly, I guess, in the progressive world, some fairly uncool things. But one memory sort of stands out, which I think probably changed my my musical course. A friend of mine just one day on the bus on the way to school, he sort of just put these headphones in my ears and said, "Listen to that," and it was the title track from Follow the Reaper, and I just lost my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard music being played like that before. The mix of the neoclassical guitar and the keyboards. So I think that's what sort of started me off looking at the whole sphere of progressive metal, and sort of naturally you get onto your big hitters, your Dream Theaters and all that. Stuff like that. It just sort of snowballed.
Children of Bodom.
Yeah.
What about you, Tom? What's your sort of the first encounters with prog? And did you like it early on? Did you like it when you first heard it, or was it like an acquired taste? Or
yeah, I was just thinking. It's funny, Danny said Children of Bodom then, because obviously, like, I had a bit of a re-listen to them after everything that happened with the singer.
He passed away.
And I think they actually, again, it's just clicking now, but I think I got Are You Dead Yet when it came out, and I was on a metal. I was getting like progressively more, pun not intended, but more into technical metal as I went. So I think the first album that like blew my head off in that sense was Rust in Peace by Megadeth, which is quite technical for a lot of the thrash stuff, and then it must have. Yeah, and there's some like longer arrangements and some weirder stuff on there. And then I just must have gone through that to Dream Theater. I had a lot of friends who were into Jethro Tull and Yes and like Rick Wakeman, just like basically really weird kids at the time. But, we'd just be driving around listening to The Mushroom Forest by Rick Wakeman. And I was big on like Cynic and stuff like that. So, I can't pinpoint exactly when I got into it. I think it was from the metal angle, and then I just got heavy into the 70s stuff as well after that.
Yeah. What about your instruments? What made you decide to pick up the guitar and the drumsticks for you, Tom? When did you start playing, and what was sort of did you have like some musicians tell me they like have a moment when they go to a gig or hear an album or see like a band, a music video or something. It's like, I want to do that. Was it like that with you, Dan, or was it more like a gradual thing?
Yeah, it was sort of gradual for me. I mean, I got my first guitar and I just sort of went around playing sort of, God, I can't even remember, just sort of nothingy songs that you would hear on the radio. And eventually sort of like classic rock, AC/DC, Journey, Boston, these sorts of things. And then eventually I had some friends and I was just like, oh yeah, metal is cool. I'm going to get a Jackson Warrior and I'm going to start a thrash metal band. And that's exactly how it went. And then I think probably whenever I was 16, I discovered that you can have more than 6 strings on a guitar. So I sought out a 7-string guitar, and that's sort of where the prog sort of journey began for me, at least as a musician. And you sort of naturally find the most proggy instrument you can. Cut off the headstock, you cut off half of the body, and then you end up with a sweet headless guitar, don't you?
Yeah. I remember. I remember. I think Paul Masvidal of Cynic is the first guy I saw with a guitar like that, and receiving like endless flack from real metalheads in the 90s for playing that headless guitar. But what about you, Tom? Tom, when did you start playing the drums, and what got you into it?
I played quite a few instruments growing up, and I had a drum kit, and I was just sort of like enjoyed whacking it occasionally, but wasn't that into it, and I started getting into heavy music, but I was a big Metallica fan, but I hadn't quite put 2 and 2 together and started playing loads of Metallica. But again, going back to Rust in Peace, I think there was one Christmas where my brother got me Rust in Peace.
Yeah.
I got a brand new set of cymbals for my kit, and all the hardware was sorted out. And it was just like, I'm not one of those guys that shits on Lars. I think he did a great job for Metallica, but Nick Menza was playing stuff where I was like, I can't play this, but I can figure it out a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. It sounds cool. I've got the picture of him. I got the expanded version, and there's a picture of him behind a drum kit with his cymbals hanging off a rack. And it just looks like he's sat behind a tank. And I think I saw that when I was like 12 and thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's a combination of all those sort of things, really. And I've not really looked back since then. I just thought, there's always been a new thing to get me into it. So by the time I was 16, it was Sean Reinert with Cynic, and that's a whole well of. And going back to talking about the headless guitars, that's an Alan Holdsworth thing, I think.
Of course,
so
it is,
those guys are, so like then you get into that, and there's an infinite well of things to be into as a musician.
Yeah,
if you're enough of a nerd.
Exactly. Once you start to touch on the musicians that inspired these bands that you like, right? Like looking at the jazz fusion inspirations of Cynic, of course, that opens a whole new world of music. So then it only becomes really how much money and how much time do you have to explore these new genres, and it's like a whole universe of great music. So you mentioned Reinert, and you mentioned Megadeth and the drums there. What about you, Dan? Do you have like some guitarist that you are like, that's high up on your list of inspirations?
I went through phases, I mentioned Children of Bodom a while ago, so I went through a bit of a Alejo stage, and that sort of progressed on. Obviously, my playing has been inspired by quite a well, I'd say some fairly big names. Your sort of Joe Satriani, Steve Vais, Petrucci back in the day, but more recently, and trying to. But I tried. I definitely did try to get into the whole blues jazz fusion sort of side of things. So Alan Holdsworth, a couple other names, Mike Stern, Scott Henderson, these sort of guys who are doing some fairly crazy things.
Yeah.
And then recently I've sort of, I'm in a, I mean, you see, I'm in a big Pliny phase at the moment. His most recent album, I sat down and tried to learn some of the licks, and it just changes the way you sort of look at the fretboard. I think you sort of, depending on who you sort of grew up listening to and trying to imitate, it sort of makes you see the fretboard in a different sort of way. So whenever you sit down and think, wow, I would never have thought to do, a run like that, play this sequence of notes. And people like Tom Quayle as well, just absolutely open a Pandora's box of guitar techniques and licks and just ways of appreciating how you look at your instrument.
Yeah. You mentioned other musicians, other bands, and I want to get a bit more local, because I feel like the Manchester scene is like very healthy and very vibrant when it comes to progressive music. There seems to be in the area around there as well quite a lot of bands. You guys have both been you, Dan, play with Paul Sadler in Spires, of course, and you, Tom, played on his solo album. And there are also other lots of other bands in that area. What can you tell me about the scene in Manchester, Tom?
I think it's, well, as you say, it's pretty decent. I've never lived anywhere else, so I can't, maybe I've taken it for granted in a sense. Like, I just assume everywhere has 10 prog bands that are all obsessive, like we are. Yeah, well, there's a lot of good bands as well. There's Prognosis who do well. There's a lot of like stoner metal and different types of things outside of that can cross over quite a lot. There's a band I saw on the Spotify progmetal playlist called Boss Kelloid.
Yeah,
who are
very good.
Yeah, and they're, I think they're in Wigan. They're just outside of Manchester, but they sort of come in, and I just think a city of this size is quite good to be creative, because you can get a lot of people in a condensed area, but it's not so expensive that you have to be bankers or whatever.
Exactly.
You can exist, and like we still just about have a solid rehearsal area for bands. There's a mill called Brunswick Mill where our studio is, and a lot of the other bands practice, and that works as a good hub. I think Spires have been in there on and off.
Yeah,
and it's still affordable at the moment, so it's a good area for people to be creative. Really, there's lots of venues as well that help with that.
I wanted to ask about that. Is there and that's as part of future plans or upcoming plans for you guys in Konom. Are there places to play around you? Do you have any shows coming up, or do you have any plans to do it, or now that the possibility might be arriving finally to do some live shows?
Well, there's lots of places to play. We haven't got any plans as it stands, but try again. It's, I don't know what I'm getting booked up for like my work side of playing music, but I don't know what the originals. I think they're still being a bit cagey about it yet, and seeing if the restrictions do actually lift before they start offering gigs. So we'll just have. I think we're just going to have to play it by ear for a few months and see where the lay of the land is. But it would be nice to get out gigging, definitely.
Well, we're coming up on those 50 minutes I usually go for, but I want to ask you finally then, or at the end, are you guys working on new music then, or will there be a follow-up to Konom at some point? I hope so. Dan?
And I think it's going to take an interesting sort of direction. I think we're definitely going to involve more of the band's sort of musical interests and influences, more than just solely looking at maybe myself and Tom's sort of influences. Like we were saying, Johnny's really big into his Genesis and his orchestral sort of stuff. It's going to be quite interesting to put our footprint on that, rather than having his footprint on our stuff. You know, it'll be an interesting sort of evolution, I think, of the band.
Of course, yeah. And I'm guessing also, since a lot of the material on this album is, like we talked about, quite old, that means that a lot have happened since 2015, to put it that way, both with the band and with you guys as musicians and songwriters. So I'm eager to hear what the next step of the evolution of Konom is going to be. Well, I want to thank you, Dan and Tom, so much for being on the Progtalks with me. You should all follow Konom on social media. Check out their album on Bandcamp. All the links will be in the description here. And even better, you purchase their music and actually, get some money back to the guys to help them create even more fantastic music. So I can highly recommend the album. And you can listen to them, of course, on all streaming services, platforms. They're available. So go out and do that. And thanks to the people watching and listening to the Progtalks. Give us a like and a subscription if you enjoy it. It helps us out a lot. So thank you guys for being on the Progtalks.
No, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, and thanks for all your help generally, Rune. We're very grateful. So
no problem. It was my pleasure. With such a great band and great music, then people need to hear it. So I'm very happy that you guys have been able to get your stuff out there for people to hear. So, well, that's it, people. Until next time, stay safe and keep spreading that prog love.
The Progtalks, produced by the Progspace. Main host, Rune Belsvik Reinås. Produced by Rune Belsvik Reinås, Vanessa and Matthias Kirsch. All graphics and animations by Vanessa Kirsch. Intro theme by Giuseppe Negri. Outro theme by Zach Munowitz. This was the Progtalks by the Progspace. See you in a week.